These are the signs that you might be doing better financially than you might expect. It can often feel as though sometimes, even if you're doing everything right, even if you're putting money away, that you're not really making the right progress that you'd hope to be making. I'm a former investment analyst and have basically spent my entire career working in the finance world, so we're going to be going through the numbers to really analyse how you can evaluate your overall financial position. Now, this one for me is the most important one, but the first indicator that you're doing better financially than you might expect is you're watching this video. So congrats, kudos to you. Whether this video is the first video or you're 10 miles down the road, you're making a step in the right direction, and so you should take that as a positive win.
Winning's winning.
You have a budget. In a survey, 65% of Americans didn't know how much they spent last month. And so having a budget is basically the bedrock of your overall financial success. Now, I'm not saying that you need to be able to verify where every cent, nickel, dollar, dime, ruble, rupee goes. That can ultimately lead you down the path of absolute madness. But it is good to have an overall idea about what you spend your money on. You don't impulse purchase. This is one of the things that they talk about in The Latte Factor by David Bach, and he refers to it as the greatest wealth shredder imaginable. It can be very easy to just kind of walk down the street, you see something you like, you just think, I'll get that for myself.
My treat.
One of the things that you'll also find is that delayed gratification is going to be another super important fact when it comes. Frankly, because compound interest takes time, you have to invest the time necessary. We all have that friend who can justify going out every night of the week. Oh, it's Monday, we need to beat the Monday blues. Oh, it's Wednesday, it's hump day, we need to get over it. Oh, it's Thursday, it's basically the weekend. And so this kind of mentality is just going to constantly erode into your overall net worth. You consistently live below your means. It doesn't matter if you're making 10 grand a year or 10 million a month. The overall principle remains the same. In order to build wealth, you have to spend less than you save, period. End of. And, you're not necessarily going to be able to live below your means every single month, but again, going back to the point about a budget, as long as you've got things budgeted and you know that on average, most of the time, that's perfect. You have a rainy day fund. A survey done in 2022 found that 22% of Americans have less than $100 in savings. An emergency fund, nice kind of soft landing pad. You know that if you have to take your car in to get it fixed, if you have to replace something, if someone has a medical bill that you need to pay for, having that money set aside in your back pocket. And there's a whole bunch of opinions about how big your emergency fund should be, how often you should contribute to it, but the general consensus is to go between 3 and 6 months. I think to go beyond that to 6 to 12 months, I think you're potentially leaving interest gains on the table. You've resisted the urge of lifestyle inflation. Now, lifestyle inflation is where you earn a bit more money or you get a bonus or something, and the first thing you do is go out and spend it. And so as your income increases, good thing, your expenses also increase, not so good thing. Or worst of all, your income increases and your expenses increase much faster, bad thing. It's absolutely nuts to me that people get a pay increase and they're £200 a month better off or whatever, and then they go out and lease a Mercedes and they spend £400 a month on that. It's just
the car's brand new.
Guys, you're worse off than you were before you got the pay rise. Now, this is where I have a slightly different approach. I think it's perfectly reasonable to want to have better stuff as you make more money, as you become more financially secure. But what you have to evaluate overall is the additional money that you're going to be spending worth it? If you're making 500 grand a year, you don't have to drive around in a 1983 Honda Civic. It's perfectly reasonable to want to upgrade. But the question you've always got to ask yourself is this expense worth it? But I think it's also worth saying up front, I think when we want to compare our own sort of financial circumstances to other people, it's very easy to compare yourself to other people, to compare yourself to people who you see on social media, and this can really kind of skew your overall sort of objectivity when you're looking at something like this. I think we live in a society that really promotes the idea of, lavish lifestyles and ostentatious shows of wealth. There was a study called The Social Comparison in the Digital Age, and what they basically found is that people who use social media more often are more likely to sort of they call upward compare themselves, which is to compare themselves to people who have a higher, what they would perceive to be a higher financial status. And, let's be real, a lot of the stuff you see on social media is just absolute nonsense. It's people on maxed out credit cards, it's people using their parents' money. It's not real.
Who still use daddy's credit cards, remember?
You pay your bills on time. A report from the Financial Conduct Authority here in the UK found that 60% of people found their bills to be somewhat stressful or extremely stressful, and they therefore found it a burden to be able to keep up with their monthly bills. So if you can pay your bills on time and in full, then you're doing pretty well. You have a plan for your finances. Now, again, this goes back to the point we made earlier about having a budget and how the budget is the bedrock of everything that you should be doing. Having a budget is completely insufficient. It's a good start, but one of the key variables that you really need to be taking advantage of in order to leverage your budget is going to be regular check-ins. Whether that's every month, you sit down, you decide, right, this is what I budgeted to spend, this is what I actually spent. and really try and understand where those differences are. You know, it's not the end of the world. Obviously, it depends how much, but at the end of the day, knowing that you're keeping a track on these things, you have manageable debts. I'm not necessarily averse to taking on debt every so often if you can get a good interest rate, if you think there's going to be a return on your investment, but the key thing is the debt has to be manageable. You shouldn't get to a point where you're entirely reliant on external debt in order to fund your lifestyle. Now, this one for me is the most important one, and it's considering the opportunity cost of the money you're about to spend. Now, opportunity cost is basically what you have to give up when you make financial decisions. Let's say you've got, two people. One is a subscriber to this fine channel, subscribe below. Another is not. And they've both got £25,000. The subscriber to this channel would say, I'm not on the housing ladder yet. Maybe that's something I want to do. And so they make good use of that money. The non-subscriber, the heathen, the non-subscriber then decides to go out and use it as a deposit for a car or something. Not so great financial choices. And this is kind of the key thing. When you're making these financial decisions, you need to think about what else could you be doing with this money, and is that a better use of your money? One of the previous points, you don't have to go absolutely mad with this. You can just kind of go, you know what, I'm spending like a couple of dollars a day on coffee. That's like my one guilty pleasure. It helps me kickstart the morning. Then, I think for the most part, that's going to be fine. You're trying to level up your financial education. We have a video on this channel, Bullshit Boomer Financial Advice, that you should definitely ignore. Check it out, link is in the description. And in that video, one of the things we talked about is there is like absolutely tried and true, die-hard financial advice that will be true for the rest of time. Some of the stuff we've talked about, having a budget, living below your means consistently, making sure you've got an emergency fund, that will always be true. But I think one of the key things is some of the advice that you get from boomers is maybe less applicable now than it was kind of when they were our age, and so you really need to be evaluating these things, making sure you're staying up to date with all the financial developments as they come through. And a really good example is investing. 20-30 years ago, you had to go through a broker if you wanted to invest. It was, you had to pick up a phone and give someone a ring through the yellow pages or whatever it may be, beyond me. But now you literally pick up your phone and you can buy a stock. That is a technological development which you need to be taking advantage of in order to make sure you're on your path to financial success. You have an honest view of your relationship with money. Really, you need to be able to have an honest discussion with yourself about what your relationship with money is like.
I just started therapy.
I love nothing more than going onto Amazon, buying a load of stuff I don't need, and then it all arrives and I just think, why have I done this? Like, what is this? What am I ever going to use this for? And so just kind of having that psychologically, just thinking, I do have these kind of spending habits that I shouldn't really have, or maybe you're kind of really conservative, you put all your money in a savings account and you're not investing it. And so just being able to really reflect about what your relationship with money is like, I think is really key. You know what your credit score is. And I think the extension to this is, and you're always trying to make it better. A credit score can basically leave you in a situation where when you're trying to get a mortgage, when you're applying for other kinds of finance, you might end up paying a higher interest rate if you're deemed to be in a higher risk category. So it's not something you have to check every day, but it's something that's worth keeping an eye on. You have a career plan and you're sticking to it. Now, don't get me wrong, the best laid plans go awry. And we did a previous video, the 6 things that got me to a 6-figure salary by the time I was 30. Links in the description below. In that video, one of the things that we really kind of emphasized is, your career is something that you have to manage kind of on a reasonably regular basis to make sure that you're always leveling up, to make sure that you're always building a network, to make sure that you're always taking advantage of opportunities as they're put in front of you. Because let's face it, when it comes to a lot of the stuff we've talked about, you can only tighten the belt so much before you can't breathe. And so having that sort of career focus and being a bit more career minded, invariably you will reach a point where you ultimately have to start growing your income. Thanks very much for watching. You've been watching Modern Money Talk. This is a channel where we talk about all things personal finance and personal development related. Make sure you've liked and subscribed below, and comment below. Do you think there's something that we've missed out in this video? Thanks very much for watching.